Whoosh! With the appearance of those fiery red light spots, the fiery spiritual energy in Liu Yang's palm suddenly surged. The originally palm-sized fire-red sun also expanded to twice its size. The surrounding spiritual energy in the air seemed to be drawn toward the light spots on Liu Yang's body, making his momentum even more impressive. Around the arena, many students' expressions turned serious upon seeing this scene. It was clear that Liu Yang had put everything into this strike. Such a force would be as thunderous as a storm. He planned to crush Mu Chen with one blow. Su Ling and the others watched intently, their faces filled with tension. Even Xun'er, standing beside them, had a much more solemn expression. Liu Yang's strength, even among the heavenly class, would be considered formidable. "I want to see how you handle this now." Liu Yang's face darkened, and he sneered at Mu Chen before charging forward. The fiery spiritual energy in his hand burned like the sun, violent and blinding. Whoosh! Liu Yang moved at lightning speed, almost instantly appearing before Mu Chen. He struck with his palm, and the fiery spiritual energy in his palm, like a blazing sun, ruthlessly slammed toward Mu Chen. Flame Sun Palm. The violent spiritual energy whipped up a fierce wind, making Mu Chen's clothes ripple and his black hair flutter wildly. However, the black pupils of his eyes showed no sign of panic, just as Liu Yang had hoped to see. Still acting calm at a time like this. You really want to die. Liu Yang's heart skipped a beat as he met Mu Chen's calm gaze. His anger flared up even more. Let me see if you can remain so composed after I step on you in front of everyone. Do you think you can step on me? Mu Chen looked directly at the already close Liu Yang. He could clearly see the malice in Liu Yang's eyes. A cold smile slowly appeared on his lips. As if you have the right. Suddenly, Mu Chen raised his head, his palms clenched tightly, and a surge of dark spiritual energy burst out from his body. The dark light in his fingertips flickered like lightning. A powerful wave of energy erupted. This spiritual energy fluctuation. On the chief's seat, Xiao Din and Master Mo's faces instantly showed surprise. Spirit movement stage mid-phase? Around the arena, a wave of shocked exclamations broke out. The spiritual energy fluctuation clearly indicated that Mu Chen had reached the mid-phase of the spirit movement stage. His strength had broken through to the mid-phase of spirit movement. This kid actually has some real skill. At the Western Academy seats, the students from the heavenly class of the Western Academy also wore serious expressions. A mid-phase spirit movement stage cultivator could rank highly even in the heavenly class. They hadn't expected a student from the Earth class to have achieved this level. This made them realize that Mu Chen truly deserved the qualification for the Spirit Road trials. Liu Mubai's handsome face remained calm, his gaze expressionless as he observed the scene, making it impossible to tell what he was thinking. The dark spiritual energy poured from Mu Chen's body like a stream, eventually enveloping his entire right arm. His arm extended like that of a gorilla, and a powerful force surged, gathering around his fist. In an instant, he threw a punch. Breaking fist. Mu Chen's arm was like a long spear drawn taut to its limit, exploding with the strongest force over the shortest distance, causing the air to tear apart under his strike. Although it was only a mortal-grade lower-tier spiritual art, at this moment, Mu Chen's strike carried the force of a mountain collapse, mixed with rolling spiritual energy, sweeping toward Liu Yang. It collided fiercely with the violent palm wind in Liu Yang's eyes, causing his expression to change slightly. Boom! A deep, rumbling sound suddenly erupted in the arena. The black and red light clashed violently, sending shockwaves through the air, shaking the atmosphere. All eyes were glued to the point of collision, where the black and red light flickered rapidly. Then, everyone saw the two figures separating, each being pushed back several steps. The two figures stood facing each other on the arena. One had a dark expression, the other remained as calm as still water. Could it be? No winner yet? Everyone exchanged glances, confused. Just as everyone was stunned, on the stage, a pale and sickly color suddenly appeared on Liu Yang's face. Then, his body bent slightly, and with a spurt, a mouthful of fresh blood was sprayed out. As the blood spurted, Liu Yang's aura instantly began to weaken, and his pale face caused a wave of shocked murmurs to erupt around the stage. Liu Yang lost. Looking at Liu Yang's pale face, and then glancing at the calm-eyed Mu Chen, everyone immediately understood the outcome of this match. Brother Mu won. Well done, Brother Mu. Haha, our Eastern Academy finally took back the first place in the Earth class. Over at the Eastern Academy, Su Ling and the others stared blankly at the scene. Then, joy and excitement quickly surged across their faces. The cheers erupted suddenly, and the deafening sound instantly suppressed the Western Academy's sighed into silence. Even Liu Yang lost. This time, the Western Academy truly lost to the Eastern Academy. Mu Yuan, Shuedong, and the others from the Western Academy clenched their teeth in frustration, but they had to admit that Mu Chen was indeed formidable. Originally, they thought he was just in the early stages of the spirit movement stage, but unexpectedly, this guy had already reached the mid-stage. Hearing the deafening cheers from the Eastern Academy, Mu Chen smiled. His tense body relaxed slightly, and then he turned to the extremely grim-faced Liu Yang and said, "I suppose we're done here, right?" Liu Yang slowly raised his head, his gaze dark and cold as he stared at Mu Chen. The cheers felt like knives cutting into his heart, trampling on the pride he held within, making the corner of his mouth twitch. A vicious look began to accumulate in his eyes. Seeing Liu Yang's expression, Mu Chen frowned slightly. The brutal trials on the spirit road this past year made him feel a hint of danger at this moment. "I'll kill you." A murderous intent suddenly emerged on Liu Yang's face. His palm clenched, and a red glow appeared in his palm, sending an extreme surge of spiritual power that violently erupted. On the chief seats, Xiao Din, Master Mo, and the others' faces changed drastically. Then, Master Mo suddenly stood up and shouted sternly, "Liu Yang, what are you doing?" Whoosh. However, just as Master Mo's harsh voice sounded, the cold-eyed Mu Chen took a sudden step forward, swiftly closing the distance to Liu Yang. His fingers curved, dark spiritual energy coiling around them, creating a sharp, cutting wind as they directly aimed for Liu Yang's throat. "You." Liu Yang didn't expect Mu Chen to react so quickly, and the latter showed no signs of defending himself. In his cold gaze, there was even a chilling murderous intent. That killing intent made Liu Yang realize that even if he used his power to kill Mu Chen, the latter would undoubtedly take his life in the final instant. A life for a life. A flash of panic appeared in Liu Yang's eyes. He clearly lacked the courage to truly exchange lives with Mu Chen, so he gritted his teeth, withdrew his hand, and placed it in front of his throat to block the attack. Essas. Mu Chen's two fingers, like sharp daggers, pierced Liu Yang's palm, causing blood to spurt out. Liu Yang screamed in agony, and the red glow in his hand flew out of his grasp. Mu Chen leaped into the air and caught the red glow. "Give it back to me." Liu Yang's face changed drastically when he saw Mu Chen seize the red glow. Mu Chen ignored his angry shouts and was about to retreat when a sudden sound of wind rushing through the air reached his ears. A powerful surge of spiritual energy shot toward him like an arrow. The sudden attack made Mu Chen frown. He quickly tapped his foot on the ground, agilely leaping back more than 10 steps to dodge the strike. Then, his cold eyes locked onto the tall figure speeding toward him from the outside of the arena. "What are you doing?" The tall figure landed beside Liu Yang. The handsome face belonged to Liu Mubai, who now looked at Mu Chen with a blank expression and extended his hand, saying, "Give it back." Mu Chen sneered, looked down at the red glow in his hand, and when he saw the object inside, the corner of his mouth slightly curled up. "So this is what you're after. No wonder you're the young master of Liu Domain." The changes on the stage had occurred in the blink of an eye. By the time everyone regained their composure, they saw Liu Mubai on the platform, their faces filled with astonishment. Mu Chen, however, paid no attention to the emotionless Liu Mubai. He simply lowered his head and looked at the object in his hand. The red glow faded away, revealing a fire red orb the size of a longan. Its surface was covered with obscure inscriptions, within which a violent spiritual power surged like a tidal wave. Spirit-breaking bead. Mu Chen's long fingers traced the smooth surface of the fiery red bead, a faint smile curling on his lips. However, the smile was somewhat cold. This spirit-breaking bead was not used for cultivation, but was a highly destructive spiritual tool. Powerful individuals who had reached a certain level could compress immense spiritual power into such a small bead, and when activated, it would unleash a tremendous spiritual attack. Creating a spirit-breaking bead required a special metal called spirit gold, which was quite expensive. Additionally, the process required extremely precise control over spiritual energy with a high failure rate. This made the spirit-breaking bead incredibly rare. Judging by the level of spiritual energy condensed within the bead in Mu Chen's hand, even someone at the spirit wheel stage would suffer severe injury if struck by it. Lu Yang, it seemed, wanted to kill him. "Give it back to me." Lu Yang, now fully aware, turned even paler. He knew that this act had violated the rules, and if punished, the consequences wouldn't be light. He glared fiercely at Mu Chen and extended his hand. "Big brother, take it back. Don't let him have any evidence." Upon hearing Lu Yang's words, Lu Mubai's eyes flickered. After all, their status was not low. As long as Mu Chen didn't have any evidence, this incident could be swept under the rug. "If you keep making a move, this spirit-breaking bead might explode right on you," Mu Chen said with a slight smile, his fingers pinching the bead, his expression calm. This matter was a rash act by Lu Yang. If you return the spirit-breaking bead to him, it's better for everyone to leave some room for negotiation, don't you think? Lu Mubai's eyes narrowed as he gazed at Mu Chen, speaking slowly. Mu Chen merely smiled indifferently. "What's going on here?" At that moment, Master Emo appeared on the platform, his gaze shifting to the three of them as he spoke in a low voice. Lu Yang's face immediately turned white upon seeing Master Emo, and he glared fiercely at Mu Chen, trying to intimidate him into silence. However, Mu Chen paid no attention to his threat. He raised the spirit-breaking bead in his hand toward Master Emo. Master Mo's expression darkened when he saw the bead. His gaze turned to Lu Yang, his voice tinged with anger. "You actually dared to use a spirit-breaking bead in a competition? Spirit-breaking bead?" Many of the students nearby took notice of the commotion. When they heard the term, spirit-breaking bead, the crowd immediately erupted in shock. How shameless! He even took out a spirit-breaking bead. Truly worthy of being the young master of the #1 domain in Biling Realm. Such a bold move, haha. Hearing the many angry voices and mocking laughter around him, Lu Yang's face grew even darker. This was truly a humiliating loss. Dean Xiao and Master Shi from the Western Academy also appeared at this moment. Master Emo walked over, explaining the situation, and everyone could see Dean Xiao's expression turn grim. "Dean, Lu Yang was impulsive, but there was no real harm done." "It's understandable," Lu Mubai quickly spoke up. "Are you implying that it's only normal if I'm severely injured by his spirit-breaking bead?" Mu Chen replied with a faint smile. Lu Mubai's eyes turned cold as he glared at Mu Chen. "What do you want?" "It's not about what I want. There are rules for handling such matters." "Let's just go by the rules," Mu Chen said nonchalantly. Lu Mubai's eyes flashed with cold light, and just as he was about to speak, Dean Xiao raised his hand to interrupt. He looked at Master Emo and the others, saying, "How should we handle this?" "According to the rules, Lu Yang will lose his qualification to enter the heavenly class," Master Emo said after some thought. Lu Yang's face turned pale. Without the heavenly class qualification, he would have no chance to compete for a spot in the 5 great academies, which would be a fatal blow to him. Isn't that a bit too harsh? There are already few who qualify for the 5 great academies. Master Shi hesitated, then lowered his voice. "Moreover, if we go this far, Lu Yang's father might not let it go. While we're not afraid, offending the #1 domain in Biling Realm could still cause trouble. However, Mu Chen's father is the Lord of Mu Domain. If this matter is left unresolved, Mu Domain might hold a grudge as well." Dean Xiao helplessly shook his head. If this matter were with an ordinary student, it wouldn't be so troublesome. But now, both of these individuals were sons of the domain lords of Biling City, so siding with either of them would be tricky. "Hey, Mu Chen?" Dean Xiao suddenly turned his gaze to Mu Chen, smiling as he said, "What do you think about this situation?" Mu Chen, seeing the smile on Dean Xiao's face, immediately understood what he was hinting at. He smiled and replied, "Dean, it's true that Lu Yang acted impulsively, but I didn't really get hurt, so it's understandable." Upon hearing Mu Chen's words, not only was Dean Xiao taken aback, but even Lu Yang was a bit stunned. He hadn't expected Mu Chen to let him off the hook so easily. However, when he saw the smile at the corner of Mu Chen's lips, his heart sank. This guy may appear gentle, but his methods were ruthless. He clearly remembered how Mu Chen had risked his life to snatch the spirit-breaking bead from him earlier. However, he did break the rules. So, here's what I'll do. I won't return the spirit-breaking bead, and consider it a token of his apology. I won't make a big deal out of it. Mu Chen smiled. He understood the dilemma that Dean Xiao and the others were in. There wasn't much to gain by dragging this issue out, so he decided to take advantage of the situation and also do Dean Xiao a small favor. Lu Yang's eyes immediately widened in anger when he heard Mu Chen wanted to keep the spirit-breaking bead. That bead had been personally made by his father and was meant to protect his life. It was extremely valuable. Don't want to? Then let's follow the rules and punish you. Mu Chen glanced at Lu Yang, sounding somewhat helpless. Lu Yang's eyes twitched. He had no choice but to swallow his anger. The spirit-breaking bead, though precious, was still less important compared to the spots in the 5 great academies. Since you've taken a liking to the spirit-breaking bead, then I'll just give it to you. Lu Mubai, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. His words were accompanied by a faint smile, but there was a sharp glint in his eyes. Mu Chen glanced at Lu Mubai with a smile. Although Lu Mubai had concealed his intentions well, Mu Chen could still detect the dark malice in his gaze. This guy was definitely more troublesome than Lu Yang. Since Mu Chen isn't going to make a fuss, let's consider this matter settled. However, if Lu Yang dares to behave like this again in the future, no matter who your father is, I will deal with it according to the rules, Dean Xiao said, relieved that Mu Chen had chosen to let it go. His tone grew more severe as he turned to Lu Yang. Lu Yang's face alternated between red and pale. He didn't dare to say anything more. Although he maintained neutrality in Biling City, he wasn't afraid of the Lu domain. Thank you, Dean. Lu Mubai smiled, and then extended his hand toward Mu Chen. Thank you, Mu Chen. Oh, and now you're a student of the heavenly class. I'm very interested in you. I hope we can exchange ideas sometime. His handsome face was smiling, but the coldness hidden in his eyes was something only a few people could detect. Senior Lu, you're joking? Mu Chen gazed at Lu Mubai with a bright, sun-like smile on his own slender, handsome face. He reached out to shake Lu Mubai's hand before pulling it back, his eyes still calm like a deep lake. Lu Mubai was indeed outstanding and knew how to endure, but compared to those maniacs in the spirit path who would smile sweetly and then strike ruthlessly without hesitation, he still lacked that bit of edge. On the stage, the two shook hands. Though both wore smiles, those who were sensitive could sense the subtle undercurrent of competition beneath the calm. This Mu Chen, he's really impressive, even standing up to Senior Lu without backing down. Not far away, the senior students from the Western Academy's heavenly class couldn't help but comment. Regardless of Mu Chen's strength, just his courage to stand in front of Lu Mubai was enough to leave them in awe. Looks like once this guy rises in the heavenly class, things are going to get interesting. Hong Ling, with a finger twisting a lock of her green hair, looked at the young man standing before Lu Mubai on the stage. His figure was tall and his face handsome, with an aura so different from the lazy boy she remembered from years ago. The contrast made her feel slightly dazed. Unconsciously, the person she had once overlooked had grown to such an extent. With the matter of Lu Yang being settled, Dean Xiao immediately announced the results of the academy trial. Mu Chen stretched his back as the academy trial came to a close. The 5 great academies were getting closer, and the unresolved grudges from the Spirit Road would be settled there. He looked up at the clear blue sky and smiled slightly. Jixian, this time, let's have a proper fight. The academy trial gradually came to an end, but its aftermath lingered for days. Everyone was still talking about the fierce battles that had unfolded during the trial. Mu Chen, however, remained low-key. If it weren't for the matters surrounding the Spirit Road, perhaps not many students would have paid attention to him. Even though he had a strong background, his fame was still overshadowed by people like Liu Yang, whose dazzling reputation outshone his own. Before the trial, not many had believed that Mu Chen stood a chance against Liu Yang. But an unexpected turn of events unfolded right before their eyes. The seemingly low-profile Mu Chen had decisively defeated Liu Yang and earned the top spot in the Earth class, successfully advancing to the Heavenly class. Everyone knew that with his strength in the mid-spirit movement stage, he would undoubtedly rank highly even among the students of the Heavenly class. This was enough to make people gasp in surprise. It made them realize that Mu Chen's qualification for the only spirit road in the Northern Spirit Realm was not as unbelievable as they had initially thought. The Heavenly class was where all the best students gathered, and the first requirement to join was to reach the spirit movement stage. This meant that even the weakest students in the Heavenly class were at the early stage of the spirit movement realm. Every student viewed the Heavenly class as their goal, for it was the only pathway to the 5 great academies. Only after entering the Heavenly class could one compete for a spot in the 5 great academies. The selection for the 5 great academies was extremely rigorous, with the primary requirement being that a student must reach the spirit wheel stage before the age of 18. Just this one condition alone was enough to deter countless young talents. At present, there were probably no more than 5 students in the Heavenly class who met this requirement. This clearly showed just how terrifying the admission conditions for the 5 great academies were. Despite the strict criteria, countless talented youths still rushed toward it, like moths to a flame. The power of the 5 great academies was undeniable. Even Mu Chen knew that, despite the vastness of the Northern Spirit Realm, in the eyes of the 5 great academies, it might as well be insignificant. Its domain lords were at best in the Divine Soul stage, and such strength could easily be surpassed by even a single instructor within the 5 great academies. Within the 5 great academies, there were true supreme-level experts, figures whose every move could reshape the world. 4 talented youths like Mu Chen, to stand out in the vast great thousand worlds, they needed structured training. Without it, even the finest raw gem would remain unpolished. Unfortunately, such high-end training wasn't something Mu Chen's father could provide. If only his mother were around, perhaps, according to Mu Feng, she could have done so. But sadly, thus, the 5 great academies were an insurmountable hurdle on the path to becoming stronger. Hey, you two, hurry up. It's your first time in the Heavenly class, and you're still dragging your feet. Tang Xun'er called out in frustration, glancing back at the 2 boys behind her on the stone path shaded by trees. Mu Chen lazily glanced at Tang Xun'er's slender figure ahead and said, "Why rush? We still have time, don't we? You idiot. If you keep moving so slowly, all the good spots in the training grounds will be taken." Tang Xun'er shot him an annoyed look. Mu Chen helplessly shook his head. Tan Qingshan, who was beside him, nudged him and said, "Mu Chen, we should probably listen to senior sister Xun'er and hurry up." Tan Qingshan, always serious and stoic, blushed slightly as he looked at the graceful figure of the girl ahead. Mu Chen was a bit surprised to see Tan Qingshan's face turning red, and he couldn't help but laugh. "Do you like senior sister Xun'er?" Tan Qingshan's face turned crimson in an instant, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Bang! Before Mu Chen could say anything else, Tang Xun'er had stormed back, lifting her long leg and kicking him hard in the knee. "If you keep running your mouth, believe me, I'll beat you." Tang Xun'er glared at him fiercely. The sharp pain in his knee made Mu Chen grimace, but seeing her furrowed brows, he quickly cleared his throat and said, all right, let's go to the training grounds." Tang Xun'er snorted, turned around, and continued walking. "You two are new to the Heavenly class, so you'd better be more careful. There are a lot of annoying, pretentious people here. Xun'er, do you think I'm the kind of person who likes to use my father's identity to pressure others?" Mu Chen chuckled lightly and said. Tang Xun'er thought for a moment before nodding slightly. Indeed, Mu Chen rarely mentioned his father's identity. All of his fame had been earned through his own strength. "As long as you know," Tang Xun'er teased. "Also, the old foxes in the Heavenly class, you know what I mean, don't provoke them. They may not have the right to go up anymore, but that's exactly what makes them troublesome." Mu Chen nodded. He understood what Tang Xun'er meant. The old foxes she referred to were those who no longer had the qualifications to enter the 5 great academies, but were still lingering around. These students, who were over 18 and hadn't reached the spirit wheel stage, had lost their chance to enter the 5 great academies. With no more goals to pursue, they seemed to be muddling along, waiting for their departure. It was exactly these kinds of people who didn't care much for the rules, so others generally avoided them. I don't like causing trouble. Chen shook his head and didn't say more, but Xun'er, who knew him well, understood the implication. He didn't look for trouble, but if someone tried to provoke him, they would soon learn that this seemingly mild-tempered young man could be far more than they bargained for. Don't worry, I'll protect you. In this Eastern Academy heavenly class, there's no one I'm afraid of, Xun'er said with a playful smile, her expression as radiant as a blooming flower, quite captivating. On the side, Xun'er, seeing the two in a friendly conversation, couldn't find an opening and simply followed along quietly. The three of them walked toward the east. After about 10 minutes, they finally stopped and looked ahead. There, a massive hall stood, with students coming and going, hurriedly entering. Chen stared at the hall, a hint of surprise flashing in his eyes. He could feel the spiritual energy in the air gathering toward the hall as though drawn to it. The spiritual energy inside must be far denser than outside. This is a spirit gathering array? Chen asked. Xun'er nodded, her tone a bit proud. This is a training hall of great importance. Only students of the heavenly class are qualified to enter. Inside, we spent a huge amount of resources to invite a spirit array master from the 5 great academies to set up a 3rd grade spirit gathering array. This is the only 3rd grade spirit gathering array in the northern spiritual realm. A 3rd grade spirit gathering array. Chen clicked his tongue. A spirit gathering array was extremely beneficial for cultivation, and as the young master of Mu domain, he was well aware of its value. Even their domain couldn't afford to set up a 3rd grade spirit gathering array. Not only did it require rare and precious materials, but even a spirit array master was hard to come by. To get one, they must have used a lot of connections. I've heard that the 5 great academies have 6th grade or even higher level spirit gathering arrays. The speed of cultivation there is incomparable to the outside world, Xun'er said, a bit of longing in her voice. Just thinking about a 3rd grade spirit gathering array was amazing, and the rumored 6th grade was almost unimaginable. Once you get into the 5 great academies, you'll experience it for yourself. Come on, let's go inside. Chen smiled and led the way toward the precious hall. Walking through the heavy gates, guarded by sentinels, they first entered a vast plaza. In the plaza, massive stone pillars stood, etched with complex spiritual runes. As they glowed, they gathered all the spiritual energy from the surroundings. Chen inhaled deeply, feeling the rich spiritual energy enter his body. He couldn't help but praise, no wonder it's a 3rd grade spirit gathering array. We're almost out of time. Let's hurry. The closer we get to the center of the array, the denser the spiritual energy. We need to find a good spot, Xun'er said, pulling Chen along while guiding Xun'er quickly toward the cultivation area. At this time, many heavenly class students had already arrived in the training area. Xun'er was clearly a well-known figure in the Eastern Academy heavenly class, and as soon as she arrived, many eyes turned toward her. Who's that guy? Why is he so close to Xun'er? Heh, you don't know him? That's Chen. A few days ago in the Academy trial, he defeated Lu Yang and entered the heavenly class with the top score in the Earth class. I heard he's already reached the mid-spirit movement stage. Mid-spirit movement stage? That's impressive. With that level of strength, he's already one of the top students in our heavenly class. True, but that's not enough for him to be reckless in the heavenly class. Heh, there are so many people who like Xun'er. Guys like Zhangli, Tungyong, and others are all at the mid-spirit movement stage. Does he not fear causing trouble? As they spoke, their gazes inevitably turned toward another part of the training ground. There, several figures were seated in meditation. However, their expressions were somewhat gloomy, and the source of their dark stares was none other than Chen, who was being pulled by Xun'er. Chen, being dragged along by Xun'er, scanned the area and noticed all the gazes on him. He couldn't help but smile wryly. It seemed he had underestimated Tang Xun'er's popularity in the Eastern Academy's heavenly class. "We'll sit here," Tang Xun'er said, not paying attention to the glances directed at them. She led Mu Qian straight into the training ground and stopped at a spot near a golden stone pillar. Next to the pillar, there were 3 cushions resembling jade stones. Mu Qian took a look around, his gaze resting on the golden pillar. A hint of surprise flashed across his eyes as he sensed the abundant spiritual energy emanating from the pillar. Clearly, this golden pillar was one of the few spirit-gathering pillars in this third-grade spirit-gathering array. Cultivating near such a pillar would naturally have better results than elsewhere. This spirit-gathering pillar must have been crafted using spirit-gathering stones. No wonder this is a third-grade spirit-gathering array, Mu Chen remarked. Spirit-gathering stones were valuable materials beneficial for cultivation, and their price was high. The pillar, entirely crafted from these stones, must have cost a considerable amount. No wonder many regarded spirit-gathering arrays as a symbol of an academy's financial strength. Tang Xun'er nodded, sitting down and stretching her slender arm. She slightly puffed out her chest, causing her clothes to outline a few alluring curves, which caught the attention of many in the training ground. "Qingshan, are you here to cultivate as well?" Mu Chen asked with a smile, looking over at Tan Qingshan. He knew that this spot was considered quite good for cultivation, and many would likely want to compete for it. But Mu Chen wasn't too concerned. While he didn't wish to attract too much attention, he wasn't one to deliberately act humble and make himself uncomfortable. As soon as Mu Chen sat on the jade cushion, he immediately felt the spiritual energy from the surrounding environment become denser. He couldn't help but activate the Great Pagoda art, absorbing the spiritual energy into his body. After refining it with the Great Pagoda art, the energy transformed into dark spiritual power and surged into his qi, gradually making the spiritual energy within it more robust. With such rich spiritual energy aiding him, Mu Chen could clearly feel the speed of his spiritual power growth increasing at least twofold compared to his previous training. The noticeable increase in spiritual power caused even Mu Chen to feel a surge of joy in his heart. He then focused all his attention on his cultivation, shutting everything else out. Tang Xun'er, noticing that Mu Chen had already entered a state of cultivation, pouted her lips and then closed her eyes, also beginning her own training. However, their peaceful cultivation was soon interrupted by the sound of loud chatter from the outside. Mu Chen opened his eyes first, glancing over at Tan Qingshan. He saw that the young man's face was dark with anger, his fists clenched tightly, clearly suppressing a great deal of rage. In front of him stood 2 older youths, who were mocking him, occasionally pointing and laughing at Tan Qingshan. "What are you doing?" Mu Chen furrowed his brow and coldly asked, staring at the 2 youths. The 2 boys noticed Mu Chen and frowned as well. One of them gave a faint smile and extended his hand toward Mu Chen. "You must be Mu Chen, right? I've heard your name before. I'm Jiang Li, and this is Tang Yong." Mu Chen looked at Jiang Li's extended hand but did not reach out to shake it. From the man's eyes, he sensed a trace of hostility. "Is there something wrong?" Mu Chen asked. Seeing that Mu Chen didn't react, Jiang Li and Tang Yong's faces grew somewhat awkward. Jiang Li then pointed toward Tan Qingshan and said with a smile, "It's nothing. We just wanted to switch spots with him." "No. Next time, get here earlier if you want a spot," Mu Chen replied indifferently. "Jiang Li, what are you doing?" Tang Xun'er had also snapped out of her cultivation. Seeing the situation, her beautiful eyes widened in anger, and her brows furrowed as she scolded them. Jiang Li shrugged casually and said, "Xun'er, you should know the rules of the training ground. This spot isn't one that newcomers can just sit in." Jiang Li spoke, casting a glance at Mu Chen. Although they disliked the latter, they knew Mu Chen was not someone to provoke. His strength was on par with theirs, and his background was formidable as well. So, they chose not to directly cause trouble with him, but instead targeted Tan Qingshan, clearly intending to use him as a pawn to provoke Mu Chen. "You!" Tang Xun'er's beautiful eyes burned with anger, about to speak when Mu Chen stopped her. He furrowed his brow and looked at Jiang Li and the others, as if thinking for a moment before saying, I know that only those with strength are qualified to sit in such positions. I believe I have that qualification. Tan Qingshan is my friend, and he will be sitting here as well. If you have any objections, or if you want to show off your strength in front of me, I'm happy to accompany you." Their conversation didn't go unnoticed, and many were paying attention. Naturally, Mu Chen's words were heard clearly, causing an immediate stir. This newcomer was indeed impressive. Zhang Li and the others, however, grew increasingly uncomfortable as their faces darkened. They hadn't expected the seemingly mild-mannered Mu Chen to be so assertive. They glared at Mu Chen's serious face, but for a moment, they dared not retort. They had heard about the battle between Mu Chen and Lu Yang, where Lu Yang, with his spirit vein, was someone even they didn't dare claim to defeat. Yet Mu Chen had done it. They honestly didn't have the confidence to overcome him. Heh, no wonder you're the young master of Mu Domain. Your words have such flair. Just as Zhang Li and the others were starting to feel trapped, a somewhat unpleasant laugh came from behind. The two turned around, and their eyes immediately lit up with delight. "Brother Luo." Hearing Zhang Li's excited voice, Mu Chen also turned his head. A figure was slowly approaching, around 18 years old, with slightly sunken eyes and thin lips that carried a cold, indifferent air. Luo Tong. Tang Qiner's expression darkened slightly as she looked at him. Luo Tong? Mu Chen raised an eyebrow. He wasn't unfamiliar with the name. Luo Tong's father was the domain lord of Bailing Realm. However, Luo Tong had already reached 18 last year, and his strength remained in the late stage of spirit movement, meaning he no longer qualified to enter the 5 great academies. This also meant that Luo Tong was exactly the old fox Tang Xun'er had mentioned, the most troublesome type of person. "Mu Chen, it's been a long time." Luo Tong stood before Mu Chen, grinning widely, though his smile wasn't exactly friendly. They had known each other for a while, but neither of them had ever been on good terms. Mu Chen gave him a glance and said, "You're here to show off in front of me? Me? Dare I? You're the genius who got the Spirit Road qualification." Luo Tong curled his lip, pretending to be surprised, though his voice was laced with envy. When he first heard that Mu Chen had earned the Spirit Road qualification, his eyes had turned red with jealousy. Now, at 18, he hadn't even reached the Spirit Wheel stage, which completely shattered his hopes of entering the 5 great academies. Thinking of Mu Chen's talent, it seemed easy for him to get into the 5 great academies, which only fueled Luo Tong's burning jealousy. Mu Chen withdrew his gaze, too lazy to entertain this pitiful, jealous man. Compared to Lu Mubai, Luo Tong was truly nothing special. "Move aside." Seeing that Mu Chen ignored him, Luo Tong's anger flared, but he didn't directly provoke Mu Chen. Instead, he looked at Tan Qingshan and coldly said, "Move aside." Regardless of strength or background, he clearly didn't see Tan Qingshan as a threat. "Luo Tong, don't go too far," Mu Chen said, his voice colder. "What's the matter? You dissatisfied? Want to fight me?" Luo Tong sneered. He was in the late stage of spirit movement, and at that moment, he wasn't afraid of Mu Chen at all. In fact, he was hoping to provoke Mu Chen into a fight so he could teach this annoying, talented guy a lesson. Mu Chen's dark eyes locked onto Luo Tong. As Luo Tong gazed into his seemingly bottomless eyes, his momentum faltered. No matter how much jealousy he felt, he knew what it meant for Mu Chen to have earned the Spirit Road qualification. If Mu Chen hadn't been expelled from the Spirit Road at the last moment, Luo Tong wouldn't even have the chance to act so arrogantly in front of him. His aura wavered for a moment, but Luo Tong quickly regained his composure. "You don't dare?" Luo Tong shouted, his face contorted with anger and shame. "Luo Tong, what are you doing?" Before Mu Chen could respond, a deep voice rang out from not far away. The crowd turned their heads and saw a tall, burly figure striding over. He stopped in front of Luo Tong and barked, "Emoling, aren't you meddling a little too much?" Luo Tong frowned at the imposing young man before him. This was no ordinary student. He was well known among them, ranked just below Lu Mubai from the Western Academy's heavenly class. Now at the late stage of the spirit movement stage, he was highly likely to break through to the spirit wheel stage within half a year. When that happened, he would qualify for entry into the 5 great academies, making him one of the key talents nurtured by the academy. The cultivation class is about to start. If you keep stirring up trouble here, Teacher Mo won't let you off easily, Mo Ling said, clearly unimpressed with Luo Tong, his brows furrowing. Luo Tong's face darkened, but he knew Mo Ling wasn't someone he could intimidate. He clenched his teeth in frustration. Just then, a figure slowly stepped into the training grounds. At the sight of him, the entire group of students fell silent, because the newcomer was none other than Teacher Mo. Luo Tong caught sight of him and dared not continue the quarrel. He simply shot Mu Chen a glare and clenched his fist before unwillingly returning to his spot. You guys okay? That guy's a pain, but you'll get used to it. Mo Ling turned to Mu Chen with a friendly smile. We're fine. Thanks. Mu Chen responded with a warm smile. No problem. I've heard about you, the only one from the Northern Spirit Realm to qualify for the Spirit Road. Heh, looks like I'll have some real competition in the future. Mo Ling chuckled, waving his hand casually before turning and leaving. Watching Mo Ling's departing figure, Mu Chen smiled as well. He found himself liking the burly youth. Mu Chen, thanks, Tan Qingshan said gratefully from the side. We came here together, of course, we look out for each other. Don't mind those guys. Sooner or later, you'll surpass them. Mu Chen reassured him with a smile. Tan Qingshan nodded firmly. By now, Teacher Mo had strolled lazily into the training grounds. He glanced at Mu Chen but said nothing. With a casual wave of his hand, several beams of light shot out, embedding themselves into the surrounding stone pillars. At that moment, the students felt the spiritual energy in the training ground grow significantly denser. It was clear that Teacher Mo had fully activated the spirit gathering array. Feeling the thick surge of spiritual energy, Mu Chen grinned and said no more. He closed his eyes, entered a meditative state, and began refining the influx of energy within his body. The half-day training session passed in the blink of an eye. Just as Mu Chen absorbed the last wisp of spiritual energy into his qi and prepared to conclude his cultivation, his body suddenly trembled. A strange sensation spread from his qi. Caught off guard, Mu Chen froze for a moment. Then, an overwhelming sense of joy surged through him.